I give the CIA a total credit for sponsoring and initiating the entire consciousness movement, counterculture events of the 1960s.
Welcome back to Rise to Liberty podcast. Today we have a very special guest. I'm going to just jump straight into it, but real quick, just wanted to give a quick intro. So, Dr. Carole Lieberman, known as America's Psychiatrist, is a board-certified forensic psychiatrist, best-selling author, and media personality. She is a 3-time Emmy-honored TV host and has served as an expert witness in numerous high-profile cases, including the Gabby Petito civil suit, among many. Dr. Lieberman is sought-after commentator on political psychology, terrorism, celebrity crime, and mass violence. Her work has appeared on Fox News, Newsmax, Court TV, The Washington Times, and beyond. So, other than that, let's just get straight into it, shall we? So,
I must say that was quite an opening. Very interesting. And I was blown away by all these references to Jolly West. I was on the clinical faculty of UCLA. I have a lot of connections to UCLA. Really? I was on the clinical faculty for years, and I got after my MD, I got my master's in public health at UCLA, and I taught classes in UCLA for the medical students and for the regular college students. So for years I was very connected, but it kind of has gone off the deep end at this point, with their protests and all that. But right. Anyhow, Jolly West had something to do with MK Ultra.
Yes, he did. He is connected very thoroughly. He was actually Sidney Gottlieb's right-hand man in all of it.
I don't really know who Sidney Gottlieb is, but
so Sidney Gottlieb, he worked for the CIA, and he was in charge of the entire program.
I see. So and what did Jolly West do? I know the rumor that was going around, everybody would say, he once used the dose that you're supposed to use to shoot an elephant. There was something about he used too much. Oh yeah, he was supposed to just anesthetize the elephant, but he used too much and the elephant died.
Correct. Yeah. I can't remember the elephant's name, but he had injected the elephant with LSD, and unfortunately the elephant passed away because of it. And I had recently found out that when he was administering the dose, he had actually dosed himself as well with a incredibly massive dose of LSD, and was away for about a week, I believe. So.
Oh wow! Huh?
Yeah. So yeah, he has incredibly strong connections all the way through. We tend to focus on him quite a bit, just because he's such a big name, or at least I have in the past. But that's incredibly interesting being at UCLA. And is that where you got your MD from?
No, I got my MD from the University of Louvain in Belgium.
Oh, interesting.
And then I did my psychiatry at my residency in psychiatry at NYU Bellevue, where I was chief resident. So, and there were things in between. But, Jolly West was always good to me. I don't have any complaints. Was he doing nefarious things? I mean, MK Ultra is not good.
Correct. So this is also something I also talk a lot about, is that people can do nefarious things and not be nefarious to everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly fascinating, to where people can compartmentalize things. And because I have also talked to many people that have also worked with him directly, even spent time at his home when he was still alive, and they just have nothing but the nicest things to say about him. And so people are just complicated, there's
yes.
there's a lot to them. And it does seem as though, at least through documents that have surfaced, that he was incredibly linked to a lot of these programs and knew about it. So it's the duality of man, I guess.
Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah. Had a lot of connections with the Haight-Ashbury Clinic in San Francisco during the 60s. Ran a hippie crash pad, I guess, which apparently a lot of his students thought it was a joke and just went along with it because they weren't sure if he was being serious or what. It's because, I mean, straight-laced doctor, trying to get a bunch of hippies to come and take LSD in his crash pad and study the results. It's kind of interesting that way. So real quick, I'm kind of curious what got you into the field? What sparked your interest? Why did you go this route?
Well, first of all, when I was around 8 years old, I read a book about the first woman doctor in America. She was British, but she was the first, certified or credentialed doctor in America. And she worked at a clinic. She helped people at a clinic. And that got me interested in being a doctor. And then when I was a teenager, I read Freud's interpretation of dreams. And that, I totally connected with that. And that, set me on the path for being a psychiatrist. And then I decided, I knew before I went to medical school that I wanted to be a psychiatrist who would not just sit in an office and treat patients all day, but would, share my insights and so on with the world, like to do what I do, basically, in the media, books and television and radio and so on. And so I was kind of headed in that direction from a relatively early age. Do you remember Joyce Brothers?
Yes,
do you know who Joyce Brothers was?
I've heard the name.
She was a psychologist, and she was doing all of that. And that's kind of, I saw that and I thought that's what I want to do. Except I wanted to be a smarter Joyce Brothers.
So where has your career taken you? Of course, I've given the introduction, but I think that only covers so much. So where have you been? Where have you wanted to go?
Well, I was born and bred in New York, for starters, and it took me, first of all, to medical school in Belgium because I was a psychology major in college. And I took the basic, chemistry and physics and biology, all the things you need to get into medical school. But, when I was applying, they didn't really accept a lot of women. So I found myself on a plane to Belgium. I had studied French in school, and I asked this medical educator who, what medical schools, what's the best medical school in Europe where they speak French? And he said the University of Liberman in Belgium. So that's where I picked. I mean, applied to others. I got into others. And so I went to, I spent the first 3 years in Belgium. And then I was kind of bored. So I moved to Paris, and I lived for almost 3 years, the next 3 years in Paris. But I commuted to Belgium. So I continued at that school. I didn't want to, because I would have had to have an extra year to change to a Paris school and all of that. Anyway, it was very, of course, being in the middle of Europe was incredible, skiing in the Alps and going to London, traveling all over. And then the party was over. And when I was finished, I did a sub-internship in Connecticut and an internship in New York at the New York Infirmary. And then I did my Bellevue psychiatry residency. And it was after that I moved to California. And when I first, when I moved here, I worked in a hospital as the director of day treatment and outpatient at a hospital here. And then I was consulting to the state mental hospital here. I would go into the units, and they would present their problem patients, and I would tell them what to do with them. And And then I took a master's in public health at UCLA, and I got a grant from the NIMH, and my focus was how to use the media for public health education. And Fauci should have taken that course, should have gotten a master's, because he didn't know what the hell he was doing, during COVID. And during COVID, I created this list, it was a mnemonic kind of, where it was heal myself, and every letter stood for something that you should do every day to increase your immune system, like laughter and social support and just different things like that. And I, did a lot of media, spreading that around. And that was, of course, a lot healthier for people than the vaccine. And what else? I did when I first came here, I was very much into media violence, into trying to stop media violence. And I was the head of the National Coalition on TV Violence. And I testified before Congress many times on why there needs to be less media violence, and everything from guns to like toy guns to not real guns, toy guns. Back then, that was before Obama. When Obama got to be president, I realized just how important guns were and how important the Second Amendment was, because you could get a president like that and it would all be over. So I did a lot of, protests in front of movie theaters, and I brought down the Schwarzenegger rocket in the early 90s. There was a rocket that was supposed to go up with an ad for the Schwarzenegger. It was the first NASA rocket where they allowed companies to put experiments and so on the rocket, and then they had to contribute some money for it. And so as part of that, they sold the outside of the rocket. They auctioned it, and Sony and Columbia bought it to advertise Last Action Hero. And I read that one day in the LA Times, and I couldn't believe, I thought this was a joke, but it wasn't a joke. And first of all, I thought it was pretty tacky to sell the outside of a NASA rocket, to begin with, but then to sell it to a violent movie was just too much. So I went on a 4-month campaign with press conferences and media interviews and all kinds of things, asking people to please contact, NASA, the president, Schwarzenegger's publicist, and Sony Columbia, and to tell them, no, tell them don't send this rocket up with this ad. And in the end, I was successful, and the rocket didn't go up because, I wasn't trying to stop the whole rocket. I was just trying to stop the ad. But the people, the companies that had paid money to have their products, their experiments in the rocket, didn't want to have anything to do with the rocket anymore after it had gotten such bad publicity, because of this Schwarzenegger film. And so I stopped that rocket. That's one of my proudest accomplishments. And what else? What came after that? It's I've written books. I've written 4 books. My first book was Bad Boys: Why We Love Them, How to Live with Them, and When to Leave Them. My next book, then after 9/11 is when I got into terrorism, and I became the terrorist therapist, because even though I was living in California at the time, my heart was and still is in New York. And I just hated, what they had done to my city. So I started with an audio video program for airlines that they played in their in-flight entertainment to calm people on planes because everybody was afraid to fly. And then I wrote, I did various interviews and so on. But my first book was in 2000, came out on 7/7 of 2006. And that was for a London publisher. It was the 1-year anniversary of 7/7/2005, which was their 9/11. And so I wrote this book, Coping with Terrorism, Dreams Interrupted. And I went there during their anniversary. And then what? I don't know. Then I did another book in 2011. So Bad Boys was in 1997, and then 2000. Well, I wrote it in 2005. 2006 was Coping with Terrorism. 2011 was Bad Girls: Why Men Love Them and How Good Girls Can Learn Their Secrets. And then my most recent book is Lions and Tigers and Terrorists, Oh My, How to Protect Your Child in a Time of Terror. So I'm really, very much into terrorism, not a terrorist, but into not only helping people, like I've helped people in America, of course, starting with that 9/11,
Right.
but then England, London, and Manchester. And then, I mean, even after the 2006, I went back to London because the book has won awards like in London and in Paris and all that. And then I went to Manchester because of their terror attack. And then I went to Paris because of their attacks. And now I'm helping people in Israel. I'm doing therapy with Israelis. And so then what else? I don't mean to take up so much time, but then
no, you're fine.
Then yes, where it's brought me. Then 4 years ago, I started honoring the anniversary of 9/11 I created a music video, and it was why we need to remember 9/11 and just all different things about 9/11. And then last year, and I put that on a mobile billboard, a truck that played it on the side of the truck, and in New York and in Washington, D.C. And then last year, I redid the video and I made it less of a warm and fuzzy video and more of a, hey guys, there are terrorists in our streets, wake up. And then I also did a music video for the first anniversary of 10/7, and I had that going around in Los Angeles. I mean, I went around with it, and the year before I went around with the one in New York. And so both the reason why I'm kind of going into that is because people can see the videos. They're on my website, terroristtherapist.com, and they can see all the videos, all three of the videos, the warm and fuzzy one, the warning one, and the October 7th one. And what else? I mean, of course, I treat patients, and I also work as a forensic psychiatrist. You can tell where my heart is.
Right.
My heart, especially well, after 9/11, I guess, in particular, but especially when we've had some presidents like Obama and like Biden, I've gotten more and more focused on bringing America back to being patriotic and being number one. And so that's why I do a lot of things related to, like the, Trump derangement syndrome, for example. But, when Biden was running from his basement, I did a whole lot of media talking about trying to warn people how he had encroaching dementia. In other words, I was able to see that he already had signs of dementia, and it was encroaching. It was going to get worse and worse as he was in office. And lo and behold, that's what happened. But people didn't listen. They voted. Well, I mean, we know they didn't all vote for Biden. I mean,
right.
he didn't all win. Right. But those who did vote for Biden would have voted for a parakeet if the Democrats had put a parakeet, because they were really voting against Trump, not for anybody.
Right.
So anyhow, the more I saw, I think it was really between 9/11 and then Obama being president, and Obama still being president with, being the puppeteer for Biden. That has just gotten me, very, very worried and very concerned and trying to stop America from going down the tubes.
Right. One thing I wanted to touch on real quick was your focus on media and violence. Is that, I mean, I assume that's still, where your heart is because of different aspects of our culture that have popped up over time with terrorism, school shootings, certain things like this.
Well, it's certainly back in the day when I was talking about, media violence more, when I was concentrating on that and testifying in Congress and all of that, I was warning people. Nobody listens to me. I think I was born before my time, or whatever that expression is. I was trying to warn people that this was going to America exporting, and I know we're not the only one that exports it, but then video games came. First I was starting to say toy guns and toy soldiers, war toys. I was very much against war toys, and then of course, we even did music, and we did things like that, and then television and film, and then video games became popular. And video games are the worst because they get the person involved in pushing the button, really pulling the trigger. And so, what I was warning people back then was that when America exports all of these games, it's going to come back to us, come back to haunt us, because it's going to do the same thing in other countries as it does here, which is, there were studies upon studies that show that the more hours of violent media, especially video games, that you consume, the more aggressive you become. And we have seen the results of that in so many ways. But like during COVID, during lockdowns, when people, were home, they were playing many more video games, violent video games, than they had before. And when they came out, they were loaded for bear. We have now air rage, and we always had car rage, all the rage. It's getting worse and worse. It's gotten worse and worse because of all those hours that people consume this media violence.
Right. And, I think maybe even just a couple of years ago, I probably would have disagreed with you. But I have done just a lot more independent research into the effects of music on people. And I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to be able to see an incredibly violent culture that's being pushed in certain music that happens to be popular amongst the hip hop and rap, and how that affects our communities outside of that.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm amongst the people that would believe that that's probably in many aspects is probably pushed for profit motive. In maybe not 100% of it, but I definitely see a lot of it being pushed for profit motive, considering who runs private prisons, who runs the record labels, and then also who's pushing certain violent aspects to that. And I see the media doing that as well, especially amongst school shooters, really starting with Columbine. And sort of glorifying these incredibly disturbed people. So one thing I kind of wanted to ask, do you feel that the media itself still has that stranglehold to where they can push virtually whatever they want and be able to get the results that they're looking for?
Well, yes and no. Yes, to a large extent, but of course now social media has kind of taken over. And of course, including like the dark web, which is, very dangerous. But television and movies are tame compared to what's going on with video games. So I don't think they're at fault as much now as they were when they were more. That was more the dominant thing that people used to watch.
Right. So one thing I wanted to transition over into is the Trump derangement syndrome. So it says here that, let's see. Well, I guess first, what would you categorize as Trump derangement syndrome?
Well, my definition is an irrational, quasi-psychotic hatred of anything Trump, resulting in rage, and over-the-top efforts to destroy him and his work.
Interesting. Where did you start seeing this pop up? At least the most?
Well, when Trump first ran for his first term, I was doing interviews about Trump derangement syndrome, but it was more like it was a very loose concept then. It was just, people who don't like Trump, basically. Yeah. And which is why I have defined it. I've defined it in the form of a diagnosis, that the typical kinds of diagnoses that there are in the DSM. But it's not just basically back then it was people who didn't like Trump and who did some crazy stuff, or who were very loud about it, things like that. But now it's gotten more, it's gotten worse. So there was a pause when Biden was in office, and some people kind of held on to their TDS. Other people just let it go. But then there's a whole new group of people, and it's much more powerful now. It's many more people have it.
Right.
And what they're doing about it is much more powerful than what they used to do. Before it was more like in conversations, or maybe throwing things at the television set, or things like that. But I'm not going to vote for him, things like that. But there wasn't that much violence. Now there's violence.
Right. So do you think that it can only be Trump, or do you think that TDS could move to a different target in the future?
It could. Well, not the same exact thing that I defined, because there are certain parts of it, that are very unique to Trump.
Right.
For example, yes, the concept of being deranged because of a politician, really hating a politician, not wanting him to get in, or things like that. Yes, that can happen in the future.
Right.
But it would be different, because with Trump, so much of it is about his personality. It's not so much about his policies. If you even ask people what his policies were, the people with TDS couldn't necessarily tell you. Maybe they could tell you one thing they don't like. But it's his personality, and it's he is somewhat of a bull in a china shop, but not in a bad way, in the sense that he is okay with being transparent, and he is very determined to make America great again, and he's not shy, clearly, about showing it and going for it. But so I talk about two different kinds of people who are most vulnerable to getting TDS. And the first is men who have low self-esteem, because Trump is like an alpha male, and he is very intimidating, and he engenders jealousy. He's got it all. He has money, he has power, he has a beautiful wife. He's got all of the things that little boys are taught they're supposed to get. Some little boys, and or in any case, they're in the movies. In our culture, it's like what little boys are supposed to get. So he's intimidating, and people who have low self-esteem and look at him and think, why don't I have all that? I'm not like that. And so they are angry at him. Then for women, there are women. It started with the Pussy Hats in the march in 2016.
Yes.
And now there are women who during the campaign, but especially after he got elected, there are women who are who have decided that they're not going to date, they're not going to have sex. Some of them shaved their head, some of them got hysterectomies, some of them, there's this thing on TikTok where where someone was recommending a certain kind of poison that you give your husband or your boyfriend or whatever, especially if they voted for Trump or they like Trump. And so it's gotten, again, much more aggressive. And so these are the kinds of people who are the most likely to get Trump derangement syndrome, but anybody could fall victim to it.
So one I guess little pushback I guess I would ask is what thought have you put into the concern of this being weaponized to somebody that might have an actual criticism of Trump, whether that criticism is agreeable or not? What is the possibility of this actually being weaponized against those people?
Wait, what? I don't really understand what you're saying.
So if there's somebody who does have, say, a legitimate criticism of Trump, but they are not amongst the let's go stop a Tesla to go harass the person while they're driving sort of people that we've seen at least recently, although that's more Elon Musk. However, but Trump
derangement syndrome also includes the people who are connected to him.
Right. So what is stopping, I guess, from the establishment being able to weaponize and just discard people who have legitimate criticisms of Trump versus, or I guess trying to group them in with the people who I would feel as though have genuine Trump derangement syndrome, who cannot tell you his policies, such as you had said.
Well, but like, who would you mean, like the right weaponizing this against the left?
Really anybody. Probably the right is probably where I would see it most. At least I would think. I mean, the left seems to be in fairly decent shambles these days. They don't have any clear direction.
Well, people, I'm not saying that anybody who disagrees with a policy of Trump's has Trump derangement syndrome.
Right.
I mean, I divided it into mild, moderate, and major. And so, like, for example, let me give you some examples of who fits into the different categories. In a mild case would be the women of The View, the ladies of The View, which I know is being a little generous by calling them only mild. But and then moderate would be somebody like the presidents of colleges who would rather stand up for anti-Semitism, which they previously wouldn't have done, than give in to Trump. So like Harvard's Claudine Gay and the different presidents who testified before Congress. Then also moderate is a woman who, you may have heard of this, a woman who was on the New York subway who saw a guy in a MAGA hat, and she started yelling out that he was racist. Did you hear that story?
Yes.
And then she chased him. Well, she didn't chase him, but he got off at a stop, and she followed him, and she ran after him, presumably to grab his hat. But then she fell on her face. So, but like, somebody like that who so in other words, the mild would be people more who sort of keep it to themselves, or else can do things. I mean, like, for example, it could be somebody with a TikTok rant. It's not necessarily keeping it to themselves, but it's not somebody who would physically or be very aggressive about it.
Right.
Then a major case is things like quitting your job to leave, or leaving your family to work full time to stop Trump, leaving the U.S. to protest against Trump, attacking the Teslas, doxing Trump supporters, swatting Trump supporters, fantasizing about harming Trump, joining a nefarious group, plotting harm to Trump, or arranging for someone else to harm Trump. And so some examples are Rosie O'Donnell, Ellen DeGeneres, who both left America, the bishop who led the national prayer service after the inauguration, and was, not talking about godly things. She was using that pulpit to criticize Trump. It was very inappropriate. And then New York Attorney General Letitia James, just a whole people, a whole bunch of other things. Of course, the two assassination attempts, the women who, the Wisconsin teen who killed his parents to get money to assassinate Trump, that kind of thing. So there are varieties. There's a variance or a variety in just that distinguishes the minor versus the moderate and major.
Right. So would you say it's fair to say that there's a level of delusion that's required for it to be TDS?
Well, with the major ones, that's where delusion can come in. I talk about different psychiatric symptoms, associated features, and one of them is anosognosia, which is the inability to recognize or understand that they have TDS and what it's doing to them. Then anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive behavior, hysteria, paranoia, sociopathy and psychopathy, suicidal thoughts, delusions, loss of touch with reality. So these things can be connected.
How close do you feel that this is to like a cult mentality?
The people, the MAGA people, or the left?
The left, the Trump derangement syndrome, whether they're left or far left, whatever it may be.
Yes. Well, I've been asked whether Trump, like the MAGA people, are a cult, and I don't really think that they are a cult, because like Trump isn't leading them to do anything per se, other than to have elected him. But the left, they do kind of, again, there's not really, there are people behind the scenes who are leading them to do all this bad stuff.
Right.
But I don't know of one particular person other than Kamala, who in her concession speech said fight 21 times. She was like a dog whistle to get people to, not give up. And I may have lost, but we're still going after these things, blah, blah, blah. Right. So, I mean, there is kind of a cultish feeling, like people do enjoy socializing and doing these things together with and being proud of their TDS. Like, I was thinking somebody should, if they haven't already, somebody should make t-shirts. I'm TDS, or TDS and proud of it. Like Bart Simpson.
Right. So you are going to be submitting this to be included in the DSM.
Right.
What does that process look like?
Well, there's a certain protocol, a certain questions that you have to answer. Like, why are you doing this? Does this not fit into some other diagnosis that's already in the DSM? How did you come up with this diagnosis? A whole list of questions that I will be filling out. And then they are supposed to look at it.
Right. And then they just go through their process of, I believe it's a board, correct? That will take a look at it.
Well, it's, there are various boards, but also there are, like, I was on the committee for the DSM-3 for the diagnosis of schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder, because I had written a paper about that. And so I was on this committee. There were about, I don't know, 8 of us, something like that. And we would meet and talk about research and talk about whether it should, the main thing then was, should it be a separate diagnosis or should it be under schizophrenia? Like should it be included under schizophrenia or make it a separate diagnosis? And I wanted it to be a separate diagnosis. I mean, because it has parts of manic depressive illness and parts of schizophrenia. And anyhow, so I know how the committees work, and there are committees for various diagnoses, not necessarily for every diagnosis, but like for major diagnoses. So I guess, though, before that, they have to decide, some committee or board or whatever decides whether these things that have been submitted, it's not just new diagnoses that are submitted, it's things where people find fault with some of the other diagnoses, and want to change some of the criteria that you have to have for certain diagnoses. So it's like all different kinds of things.
Right.
And so, yes, I'm sure probably there's a board that first looks through all of that and then farms it out, if they have decided that it's worth farming out, to committees.
Now, are you concerned at all that any of the psychiatry or psychology fields have been captured enough, like ideologically captured, to where that would put a speed bump in getting this entranced into the DSM?
Well, a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists are woke, are too far gone, and well, because when I was looking at their website to figure out the procedure to submit a diagnosis, I saw they had a whole list of like all the different committees and so on. And I hadn't looked at that website in ages. And it was all such woke stuff. It was frightening. And not that it was, I mean, I wasn't 100% surprised, because like I know that the American Psychiatric Association put out a book this past year about affirming gender, transitions and so on. And that was like, you're doing what? I mean, if the American Psychiatric Association has lost its mind, America is sunk, I mean, and of course, the American Psychological Association has also gone woke, as has the American Medical Association. So this is very bad. These are the people who Americans are supposed to count on, or have counted on, for help. And if they're going woke and have lost their mind, it's bad prognosis for everybody else. And I used to be very active in the American Psychiatric Association. When I was a psychiatric resident, I created this thing where there would be a resident level of the APA, and I did that when I was a resident at Bellevue, and I got all the New York residents, psychiatric residents, to meet and form an organization, and then it kind of spread. And I was on the national committee for public affairs committee, and I did lots of things for them. And what else? I did a whole bunch of stuff, but it wasn't woke at that time. And then then it started really kind of it started just sort of losing. There were things. I remember one of the things that disillusioned me was I had gone to, like, I used to go every year to the annual meeting, and I used to present at the meeting. And then one year I went, and it was like all the people who were presenting had done research, but their research was in certain illnesses, and they'd be finding that some medication worked better than the other medications. And then it would turn out that their research was supported by that drug company.
Right.
And that, I just
imagine my shock.
That was just very disillusioning, and I kind of became less gung-ho after that.
Right. So it does seem like it would be a bit of a speed bump or possibly even a roadblock to get this in there. Are there any other, I mean, obviously the DSM is the standard. Are there any other avenues that you have looked at, or any other possibilities of getting TDS legitimized?
Well, there's the International Classification of Disease, but I would have to kind of change it. Although I don't know, come to think of it, the way some people in different countries are feeling about Trump, there might be international Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, one of the examples I give actually for a minor case is let's see. Raphael Glucksmann, a leftist politician in France, has demanded the return of the Statue of Liberty because, in his opinion, Trump's America no longer represents the values for which they originally bestowed her to us. Monsieur Glucksmann exemplifies how TDS has spread internationally. So, I mean, it's not a bad idea.
Right. So just to kind of switch gears for just a minute. So in the DSM, does that mean if something is not admitted into the DSM that it could still exist, but it's just not officially recognized?
Sure. I coined the term compulsive shopping, and quite a while ago, and that was the first time that I was on Oprah talking about compulsive shopping, and I don't think that they've kind of changed things, but they were considering putting it in, and then it kind of went under the addictions, or excuse me, they would put it like they put spending and gambling, and there have been those kinds of addictions that have been in various places in the DSM. But I don't think compulsive shopping ever got its own. I know it didn't ever get its own diagnosis. But the point of the DSM is to have mental health professionals be able to talk to each other with the same language. But it's also for insurance companies. I don't think I didn't mention this yet, right?
No.
It's also for insurance companies to look at the codes that each diagnosis has, and they decide how much they're going to pay for treatment. And so, which is ridiculous in itself, because no insurance company should be deciding how much they're going to pay for treatment if you have this or that. The psychiatrist should be determining that, because they're seeing the patient and know what they need. Anyway, so one of the reasons why I want to get it in is because if perhaps people with TDS decide that they would like to get some treatment, this would be a way for the insurance companies it would get a code, and maybe the insurance companies would then have to, I mean, I can't say have to because they do their own thing, but it would be a way to get the insurance companies to pay for it. Now, of course, people with TDS don't necessarily think they need treatment, but it is, because there are so many divorces because of TDS. And there are so many, I mean, I have for treatment, like individual treatment and family treatment, couples therapy, people with moderate or major TDS may need medication from a psychiatrist. So there are therapies. And like, for example, the individual therapy wouldn't be, or none of them would be like trying to convince the patient that Trump is great. It would be working on things in the patient that makes them not think Trump is great. So like individual therapy for a man who has low self-esteem, which work on raising his self-esteem, getting him to realize that he could get things, he could make more money, or he could, have a lovely wife, or he could, not just be jealous of Trump, but get things, whatever it is. It doesn't even have to be those things. It could be, whatever kind of career they want, get it for themselves. Use Trump as a role model.
Right. So is it fair to say that there's a core of envy that's at the stem of all of this?
Right. Yes.
And how, I mean, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around, like, how would you even change envy? That just seems...
Well, yes, it's a hard thing to change, but it's by getting stuff for yourself. If you envy somebody's Rolls Royce, I used to have a teacher who would talk about how when he sees a Rolls Royce, he doesn't. Of course, the first thing would be, oh, look at that lucky person. I wish I had a Rolls Royce. But what he talks himself into, in any case, was, well, if that person has a Rolls Royce, that means I could get a Rolls Royce. I just have to work hard to do it.
Right.
So that's the kind of thing that you try to get people to realize that they could get whatever it is. Obviously Rolls Royce is a big expenditure, but like whatever it is, a Corvette.
Right.
That people could get it for themselves.
So to move things along, one thing I think my audience would be incredibly interested to hear your opinion on is false memory. So I'm not really sure if this is the appropriate way or the best way to ask this, but does false memory exist?
Well, now people mean a lot of different things when they say false memory. It's really confusing. If you're talking about the concept that that a psychiatrist or a psychologist, a therapist, can implant false memories in someone, like false memories of their having been sexually abused, for example. Yes, that could theoretically happen, but it doesn't really happen as much as like the media, it was a big thing a while ago. Oh, everybody, because the thing is, it's very hard to distinguish between repressed memories, true things that happen to a person, but the person's mind represses it, pushes it to the back of their mind, and so that they don't have to think about it all the time, or else they wouldn't be able to do anything else if they were in that much emotional pain. So sometimes that's hard to distinguish from memories that a therapist would, get the patient to believe.
Right. And I have seen people who do believe that psychologists, psychotherapists, this whole gambit of mental health professionals are just installing incredibly fake memories, and then the brain is unable to distinguish in between what is real and what is not real. It seems to me, with the reading and research that I've done, that it could happen, like you said, but it seems incredibly unlikely. And it seems as though any memory that was truly a false memory, which is kind of a contradiction of terms in the first place. It can't be a memory if it's false.
Yeah.
That your brain is going to know the difference between a lie and something that actually happened to them.
In most circumstances, yes. And certainly, for most things, you would be able to ask people around you, who were supposedly there when these different things happened. But there are ways, but like, it would just be like bad psychiatrists. Therapists, people who, aren't well trained or have a hunch, like, they get this idea, oh, you must have been sexually abused. And they, kind of drill that down into the person. But it's more the case. I mean, sometimes I've had a number of patients where from things that they tell me, their dreams, or just things that they remember from their childhood, or, I get the feeling somewhere in therapy that they probably were sexually abused. And but I don't like bring it out right at the beginning. I ask questions, and I wait until I try to have them bring it out. I try to let them go back to their memories. I remember, you can do that. You can also do that with guided imagery. So you get the patient to sort of get closer and closer to this truth.
Right. And I've also seen, I'm not sure exactly what your experience is, but I have seen, at least from a outsider's perspective, that it seems as though people who do believe in this entirely fabricated memory, this pseudo memory being able to be installed, also tend to push back against something like DID, dissociative identity disorder. Is that similar to your experience, that you've seen
well, it
people
sounds
amongst
like
the same?
it sounds like these are people who just who don't trust mental health professionals. That they're just
Right.
that it seems like it's a very mysterious Lulu it's, what what am I what was the show what was the show that it was where it goes they not Star Wars, but what was the show? Oh, it was older than that, where da 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 da.
The Twilight Zone.
Twilight Zone. Yes, thank you. Like that psychiatry or mental health is like the Twilight Zone, and all these things, mysterious things can happen. And
right.
I mean, not to say that there aren't some bad therapists out there,
Right.
but for the most part, and that is, just to go back, that is something that is a problem, because it's hard for someone to, how like more and more people have been taking their children out of school because of the things that they've been teaching, CRT and trans and all this stuff. And they don't want their children to be learning these things. Well, it's similar with going to therapy. If you want to take your child to therapy, you have to make sure that you have to find out what this therapist believes in. If they are super far left and they don't mind sharing their opinion with their patients, which you're not supposed to do, whether it's religion or politics or anything, you're not supposed to be talking about that stuff, unless of course they have TDS and I'm trying to cure them.
Right. Right.
But
And this is where I think it gets concerning, because a lot of what I've seen really incredible mental health professionals try and do a lot of good work amongst people that would treat DID. And it seems, I'm not sure how exactly large it is, but it seems that there is a faction within the mental health field, that there are professionals that push back against this as well. And this is my personal opinion. I'm speculating, of course, but it seems as though that these people have profited very, very, very well off of giving pushback to certain things.
what do you mean?
So there are definitely mental health professionals that do deny the existence of DID.
Yes.
And I have seen them push back against anyone who would argue with them that DID actually does exist, and they have made a very lucrative career.
How do they make a lucrative
back.
How do they make a lucrative career out of it?
Well, if you remember from the 80s and 90s, during what I guess was dubbed the Satanic Panic, although I don't agree with that categorization, there were many people coming out disparaging other mental health professionals that were able to make a living from doing such. So
You mean by convincing patients, like, don't go to this person, they're just a charlatan because they're going to tell you have your DID?
right, like
In other words, come to me. Don't go to them. Come to me. Is that what you're saying?
right, and that any existence of DID is actually just false memories, but yet false memory has never been submitted into dissociative or into the DSM. So it's never been given, at least as far as anyone can tell, as far as I can tell, that it's never been given as an official diagnosis anywhere. And yet there's been an entire swath of people, incredibly accomplished people, in fact, to be able to turn around and deny the existence. And I personally, and that would actually show, I think, a level of projection, because these are the people who would come out and say that there are a rash of psychiatrists and psychologists who are coming out who are just trying to make money. Typically, if you, and this is an area of research of mine, which is why I'm so curious about it. But watching old news clips, you can see a pattern of certain doctors pop up, and they tend to focus on the existence of false memory, deny the existence of dissociative identity disorder, and have well, like I said, been very lucrative in doing so. So it seems to me that
it's funny that, I mean, that I've never heard of that.
Interesting.
I mean, I've never heard of making a lot of money from it. So you'd have to you'd have to attract patients who believe the same, or who want to believe in false memory,
right,
and not in dissociative disorder.
Right.
And
I've personally discussed with survivors of particular abuses, and they have had an experience with their families after reading a newspaper article that, oh, you must read this book or read this news article because whatever you're saying did not happen. This is false memory.
Oh, well, yes. And so then the person, well, but that could work all different kinds of ways. Like if the person thinks they were sexually abused and the family is saying, no, that didn't happen, then the person would want a therapist who wouldn't give them a false memory, but who would help bring out the actual abuse so that the family couldn't, disagree with them.
Somebody who would give them actual mental health treatment versus somebody who might be in it for the wrong reasons.
I mean, that comes out sometimes in forensic work where, let's say somebody sues their therapist claiming that they implanted a memory or something like that. I don't have that much anymore. I used to have some of that, but it doesn't seem to be as prevalent nowadays, or at least.
Right. One thing I did want to ask, what exactly is the forensic side of this? What is the forensic work that you do?
Oh, what do I do as a forensic psychiatrist?
Correct.
I testify in court. I testify in civil cases and criminal cases on both sides. I have done on both sides, and it's all, it can be all kinds of cases. I like criminal cases the best, but it could, so it's like if I, typically I'm the defense psychiatrist. So I help, for example, I have a case now where a young man had bipolar disorder, and he was being treated by his family doctor, and she wasn't a psychiatrist. She didn't know what she was doing, and she gave him the wrong medication, and then he was drinking, and anyway, he had an accident and he killed 4 people. So I am in the process of trying to prove that he should be found not guilty by reason of insanity. Not an easy task, but I like the challenge.
One thing I did want to ask you about. I had actually seen you on another program, of which the name escapes me at the moment, but there you had been discussing women who had fallen in love with um, oh, I can't remember the term that you used, but lovers who kill, serial killers, or
Uh-huh.
these sorts of women. Uh, what exactly is that?
Well, those are the women in my Bad Girls book. No, wait, take that back. I write about that in my Bad Boys book. That is the ultimate bad boy, the lethal lover. And the women who
Yes.
fall in love with them are women who, as I was saying before, they had women who like bad boys, all different kinds, have had a dysfunctional relationship with their father. So these women their father was very cruel, and there are a number of reasons why they fall in love with these lethal lovers. For example, one thing is usually the lethal lover, especially if it's a serial killer, is famous, and nobody, everybody's afraid of him, and she feels like if she can get him to like her, she is the one who pulled the oh like pulled the something out of the lion's paw, pulled the thorn out of the lion's paw. And so then she would be the scariest or the most powerful in the whole village. Also, it's because they think a lot of times the women have had very bad, not only bad relationship with their father, but bad relationships with men. And they like the idea that their man, is in jail or prison, and that he can't get out and have dates with other women.
Right.
And so she doesn't have to worry about that he's cheating on her. But that's really not true, because these men often have lots of women who they write to and who send them money and all of this.
Right.
So I was on Sally Jesse Raphael one time. When one of the times I was on Sally Jesse Raphael, the theme was women who fall in love with these serial killers, and they had different women, representing who were in love with different serial killers. And there were two women who were in love with and thought they were going to be marrying the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, and they had no clue
Wow.
that the other one existed. They met on the stage, and they just started, fighting with each other, like tearing each other's hair out, literally. And what he did, what? And so I had to sort of calm them down before the show taped. It had started taping, and then they had this big fight, and then we had a break. And the thing was, he's a serial killer. He raped women. He killed women. And you think that he's not going to do something like cheat on you? I mean, he's done so much worse.
Right.
Why would he not cheat on you? But I think they both thought that they were engaged to him and were going to be getting married to him.
And so is it really as simple as they're just looking for that, what they're missing in the relationship with their father? I mean,
Well,
obviously it's not that simple.
no,
But
it's different things for different father relationships. Like, well, when the father is cruel, they're sort of used to that kind of it's familiar to them, this kind of harsh, criminal kind of, environment. But like there's another, on the other end of the spectrum are the frazzled frog, and that is a man who and the reason men get to be bad boys by the relationship that they have with their mother. So like the frazzled frog never had a very nurturing relationship with his mother, and he misses that. And so women who go for frazzled frogs have their father was absent. Like either he died during their childhood, or they, most commonly now, they got divorced, and or he was emotionally not present. And so they want to feel, they don't want to be abandoned by a man again. And they feel that these frazzled frogs are the least likely to abandon them. But the problem is that when they after they take care of the frazzled frog, every which way, and the frazzled frog gets, better, then they hop away and they find a woman who likes them in their current state where they have their life together. So it's all different kinds of combinations where,
right.
what they're looking for depending upon what they had with their father.
It's just so fascinating to me that they would understand, maybe not entirely, but they would know the crimes that these men have committed and just be drawn to that. I mean,
they're drawn, the worse that the crime is, the more they want to prove that they can understand this man, and he wouldn't be that way with them, they think. They would be able to tame the lion.
Right. And it seems like there was definitely a draw to certain serial killers more so than others, which makes sense to me. But somebody like a Ted Bundy, who women just seemed to fawn over, or did so at the time. And I don't know, from looking back on the news coverage, looking back on his interviews and everything, I don't see it. I don't see the charming side. And so is that is that part of all of their, I'm not even sure how to categorize it. Is that their conditioning that you were discussing, their relationship that they were used to?
Well, first of all, the men like Ted Bundy or any of them are very different towards these women than they are just in regular interviews, and the women also project onto them, what they want to see. So, especially like if the guy is good looking, they feel especially, that they're special. They feel especially honored that the guy picks them. So they think, like, for example, Luigi Mangione, he has tons of people are sending him money for his not just women though, but for his legal fees. And even Koberger, which is so ironic because Koberger, this is going on and on. Is this interview going to end?
Yes. If you do need to get out of here, we can wrap up on this if you would like.
Well, it's just that I do have other things that I have to do today. Yes, okay.
Let's see here.
Like Koberger, for example, this is so ironic because Koberger, when they first discovered the 4 dead college students, before they knew it was Koberger, I was doing interviews, like, for example, with Newsweek, talking about how the perpetrator, the killer, was an incel. Yes. And how did I know that? I don't have a crystal ball, but how did I know that? Because the scene was incredibly bloody, which meant that the person had incredible rage when he was knifing them, 4 of them. And then also, when they showed pictures of who the victims were, these were beautiful women, not just beautiful, but like they had it all together. They had lots of friends and they were doing well in school and they were the cool kids. And then the boyfriend of the one of them. And so incels have a lot of rage towards women, because especially these kinds of women, because they know that these women would never give them the time of day. And so as it turned out, after, then they did arrest Koberger. And then it turned out that when he was in school, starting in middle school, he had a crush on this blonde girl who was a cheerleader. And then they went to high school together too. There was kind of the same crowd that went to high school. Anyway, he kept liking these girls. And but it started off with his real first crush was this blonde cheerleader, and I think that that's who he was, who Kaylee reminded him of, and so he wanted to get the cheerleader totally rejected him, called him all kinds of names, got the other girls to call him names. It was like a disaster, and from then on, he never had girls who liked him. So
interesting.
And he wasn't particularly good looking, but it wasn't just that. He was awkward. Now they're saying he has autism. It's just a bunch of things and he got into heroin when he was in high school. So a bunch of things that made him not your first choice for a boyfriend. Right. And so he went through his whole life, up until the time that he killed them, feeling rejected by women, and particularly these kinds of women. And incels call these women, like the two blonde girls, Stacy's, and they call the men who have who do get to date these girls, they call them Chads. So it was a combination of Stacy's and Chad, and he expressed his rage. Now there were reports about his following Kaylee, and for months before that. So that anyhow, that's so it. But what I was saying was ironic was, so he went his whole life feeling like he was this ugly duckling and not getting girls, and now that he's a serial killer, he has all these girls sending him love letters and everything else.
Interesting.
And all of a sudden, he got to look more handsome because he's a serial killer.
Right. That's fascinating. Well, I feel like I could just sit here and talk to you all day. I do want to get you out of here because you've been so gracious with your time. What do you have coming up? What would you like to plug? Where can people find you?
Primarily, especially with what's going on these days, besides Trump derangement disorder, Trump derangement syndrome. What else is going on is all the terrorists who are trying to take over the West. And so I would like people to go to my website, terroristtherapist.com, and to buy my book, Lions and Tigers and Terrorists, Oh My, How to Protect Your Child in a Time of Terror. What's great about the book, and I'll end with this, is that it's really for children. And the first half of the book is for grown-ups, parents or teachers or people who work with children. And it's how to talk to kids about terrorism, that kind of thing. And then the second half is a picture book. And it's all the things that you need, like all the key things that you need to know about terrorism, but told in a not so scary way. Like I talk about how a terrorist is like a bully on the playground. They want you to follow their rules. I talk about 9/11. I talk about the underwear bomber. Can you imagine that? Someone who puts a bomb in their underwear. I try to make it, but I cover everything. I talk about, how they want us to believe in their religion. I don't get too deep into religion, but enough to basically an intro. And it's an intro to terrorism in a way that, and also what you can do to protect yourself, what kids should do, how they can make themselves stronger. I do talk about not watching violent media,
right.
And doing well in school, and just things to getting a job where they can help the country to be strong against terrorists. Everything. It's really like it's really everything you need to know, but we're afraid to ask.
Right. Well, perfect. I will make sure that that's in the episode description down below to make sure that people can easily find you and easily get to your book and your website. If you would like to leave now, you're more than welcome to, and I'll just close out the show. Or if you would like, you can hang out and we can wrap up on the back end. It's up to you. I know you have other things to do. But on that, thank you so much for coming.
You're very welcome.
You have been very gracious with your time, and I definitely appreciate it. I think this was a fascinating conversation that my listeners will definitely get a kick out of. So thank you so much.
You. Thank you.
Of course.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
You too.
All right. And on that, thank you so much for tuning in to risetoliberty.com or Rise to Liberty. This has been another fascinating episode. Like I said, I feel like I could just sit and talk to her all day. There's so many questions that I feel that I could just keep going. But she was wonderful, gracing us with our time. So let's see here. So with that, everyone can go to buy me a coffee. You can go to risetoliberty.com/links, and it should be in there. If not, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/deprogram. buymeacoffee.com/deprogram, DEPROGRAM, and you can buy me a coffee. There's tons of research projects I have going on that I definitely need the caffeine for. You can also head over to risetoliberty.store and go pick up a t-shirt. You can go pick up a sticker, shorts, whatever. I actually have new merch coming. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. Other than that, I would like to thank all of you for tuning in to another episode of Rise to Liberty. And let me just make sure everything is good over here. There will be a live stream tomorrow, so feel free to tune into that. That will be at 11:30 Mountain Time, which 1:30 Eastern. So anybody who wants to tune into that, we will be going through more of our False Memory Syndrome Foundation thread. And other than that, until next time, stay free, my friends. Oops, wrong video. Okay.